Howdy y'all, this is the Losman here, and it's Sunday night, so that means it's another weekly roundup. Alright, so this time around, it is 11 days till Halloween. We're getting pretty close to Halloween, folks, so it's gonna get spooky pretty soon. So, that being said, I'd also like to note a particular interesting fact about today. Today is October 20th, which is the birthday of Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi would be 137 years young if he was still alive, which wouldn't be possible because humans don't live that long. But he was born in 1882, and if you're not aware of who Bela Lugosi is, then you need to rent Dracula. I mean, the original Dracula from 1931, because he is Dracula. He's basically the prototypical Dracula as we know it today, even though the novel Dracula isn't quite the same, but yeah, he made it his own. And Bela Lugosi had a wondrous, very illustrious career playing Dracula and other creepy characters. And the final years of his life were doing doing films with Ed Wood, which weren't necessarily the best, but at least someone appreciated his hard work. Well, speaking of birthdays, I celebrated my birthday on Thursday. I turned 48. And it was an entertaining day. I got a chance to watch Shaun of the Dead on the big screen. There was a local restaurant in town that did a midnight showing. I mean, not midnight showing. They did an evening showing of it, so we got to watch, Shaun of the Dead, and it was pretty funny because I even took the girlfriend to go watch it, and there was only like one scene where she freaked out on because she doesn't like horror movies, but generally she loved it. I mean, it's a funny movie. It's a great movie. It's a cult classic, and it's definitely one of the best horror movies in the past 20 years. Now, as for gifts, I got some pretty nifty things. I got this Steelbook Blu-ray of Phantasm. I remember Don Coscarelli basically showed us a print of this when I met him earlier this year. So this is a pretty good addition to my library of steelbooks. I also got a copy of Night of the Living Dead. Now this is a Criterion collection, which means this is the premium print. Unlike the thousands of other versions you can find in dollar store DVDs and Blu-rays, this is probably the best print you'll find of this classic movie. And I mean, this movie is I mean, what can we say about it? It's legendary. I mean, literally. I mean, George Romero's 1968 classic helped define the horror movie, for the horror movies for the next generation. And definitely, this is a big addition. I mean, it's great. And like I said, it's Criterion, which is means it's the best. Now, the other thing I did this weekend was I went to a small little film festival we had locally. It's called the San Antonio Horrific Film Festival. It's not a big event. It's but it's a intimate event where filmmakers can come in and submit their films. And it's sorry, it's not too bad. I met some good celebrities last year, and this year I met Eileen Dietz, who is an actress who's been she's been in a lot of movies, mostly in supporting roles or side roles, but she's actually been in more movies than Danielle Harris, I believe. Yeah, she has. Most notably, she is in the original Exorcist. She plays Pazuzu, or that she's the face of Pazuzu. When you see that brief glance of Pazuzu, it was her. So I got to meet her. Got a photo with her. If you want to see the photo, it's on my Twitter page, or my Twitter profile, and I also probably will include it in my Instagram as well. So it was pretty fun. I talked to her a few minutes of it. We discussed some of the movies she had done, and I guess of the movies that she's made, the ones I'm familiar with, well, besides The Exorcist, include Helter Skelter, which I remember was a kind of a documentary style movie detailing the events of the Manson family murders and the trial that took place. She also appeared in a movie called Parts, or the Clonus horror, which, if you're not familiar with, here's a funny story about this movie. It was made, it was a movie, I think it was made in the late 70s or probably early 80s, and a sci-fi movie, kind of a scary premise, kind of, low budget, not many people watched it. It actually was featured in Mystery Science Theater 3000, but the movie came into the news in recent years because of another movie that came out called The Island, Well, it turns out that the island essentially ripped off Clonus, the concept. I mean, everything. I mean, there literally were over 100 distinctive features in the movie that were ripped off from Clonus. So let's just say that if you're going to make a movie, try not to rip anything off, or at least if you're going to acknowledge it, at least state, hey, yeah, this is an update movie or a remake or it's inspired by. I mean, don't just go around and steal an idea and claim that it's yours. I mean, and the fact that they spent, over $100 million on that movie, just, I mean, seriously, come on, if, I mean, I've seen both movies and Clonus does a much better job, even though it has a little budget and not really well-known movie. I think it handled the subject matter much better than the big budget movie, that featured, I believe, Ewan McGregor. I think it was Ewan McGregor and I think Scarlett Johansson. All right, now one of the she was also in Halloween 2, the Rob Zombie Halloween 2. So I don't want to leave that out though, because she's actually done quite a number of movies these past few years. So it was great meeting her, and I love going to these little kind of events, even if they're not big. At least you get to talk to the celebrities and get to interact with them. Some other things that I did pick up though, for this event, I actually got to pick up some cool merchandise. I picked up some VHS copies of some classic movies. I think I got Alien and The Abyss and The Blair Witch Project. So, I mean, normally I collect Blu-ray movies and steelbooks especially, but occasionally I'll pick up a DVD or a VHS if it's a classic movie, because, hey, those are collectibles, and it's always cool to have something, like a classic movie that you like on different media, just so that, I mean, these things will never see a VCR again. I mean, I don't trust putting these things in VCRs, but they're gonna make great display items, things to show off. Say, hey, check this out! I got an Alien VHS tape, to go along with my Alien DVD and my Alien Blu-ray and my Alien Blu-ray Steelbook. I mean, do I have it on Steelbook? No, I don't. Ooh, gotta give me a Steelbook of Alien. Ooh, 40th anniversary. Definitely something to look for. All right, now one of the special features I'm going to talk about tonight. Last week I watched a remake, which was kind of interesting because I'm not really fond of remakes. I just don't really care for the idea of a remake. Ugh. Well, I decided I was going to tackle Last House on the Left. Now, Last House on the Left is a horror movie from the 1970s, early, I believe, 1972. It was directed by Wes Craven, and Sean Cunningham, who directed Friday the 13th, was also involved in the project. If you've never seen Last House on the Left, it was definitely one of the most controversial movies when it was released. The premise is you have these two young ladies who go on a adventure, and they basically, they're going into town, watch a concert, and they encounter a group of individuals who, because they're looking to score some weed or some drugs, and the individuals they run into are criminals, and the criminals decide to take advantage of these young girls, and bad things happen, and these criminals get stuck in the middle of nowhere out in the forest, and they find a house of a friendly couple to help them out. Turns out that they're the parents of one of the girls, so what happens is very, very creepy. Well, when this movie came out, it was very controversial. I mean, literally, the movie was thrown on the UK's video nasty list, in the 1980s because of its subject matter, and it did face a lot of criticism and scorn because of the. I mean, honestly, you didn't see a movie. You never saw movies like this. Not this with this level of violence. I mean, it was a rape revenge movie, which is something that you really didn't see in that era of the early 70s. So. And it wasn't just so much the rape revenge. I mean, because you did have crime movies or movies where bad things happened to victims, and the movie was about getting justice. What made the movie controversial was the level to which the parents go to get the revenge on the guilty parties. So, and that caused a lot of controversy because the movie is very it really goes some dark places. It was the movie itself was featured on one of my disturbing movies lists. It's not on my Dirty Dozen because I didn't think it had quite the impact that the other movies did, but it's still a memorable movie, and it's still a movie that people still talk about to this day. Well, that movie, like I said, was released in 1972, and it featured Sandra Peabody and Lucy Grantham as the two young ladies. Now, I did rewatch it recently so I can, get a fresh perspective on the movie. I mean, because I did watch it over 20 years ago. And I noticed that actor Martin Kove was in it. He plays the bungling deputy in there. Now, you may be asking, well, who's Martin Kove? Well, Martin Kove is an actor who is best known for his role in Karate Kid. He was the sensei of the Cobra Kai. The big mean guy. Basically, the nemesis or the antagonist or the teacher of the antagonist. He was also in Rambo 2, and Martin Kove's a pretty interesting actor. He always plays those kind of roles, those kind of like those tough guy roles that guys that aren't necessarily on the right side. But it was fun seeing him in this role. It's like an early role of his. About the only person I recognized in that movie. But yeah, the original Last House on the Left is definitely one of the most infamous movies ever made, and it's definitely something you want to rewatch. Now, keep in mind, it is a movie that is literally a year younger than I am. 47, 46 years old, so it's going to be a little dated. It's gonna have some strange music scores and the arrangement of it, because this was made before the era of a slasher movie. This is a rape revenge horror film, so it's a little different from your typical horror movie you might be accustomed to. And the other thing is, I remember it had one of the best taglines of a movie of its day. It was it's something like, remember, keep telling yourself, this is only a movie. This is only a movie. This is only a movie. Okay, now that being said, I did catch the remake of Last House on the Left, and that one came out in 2009. It was directed by Dennis Iliadis. Yeah, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. And it starred Sarah Paxton and Martha McIsaac in the two roles of the two young women who basically get kidnapped, and terrible things happen to them. Now, the remake, obviously it's a little more polished. It's a little more, like a standard movie. But after 40 plus years of since the release of the original, yeah, the impact of a rape revenge movie is going to be a little different than the movie that was released in the early 70s. Now, keep in mind, it is still a very violent movie. They do show some graphic imagery of sexual assault on the actresses, the characters that are being held. And, there is, some, of course, there's nudity in there because, it's rape revenge. The movie itself doesn't have quite the same impact as the original movie, because the revenge is handled a little differently than it is in the first movie, but it's still a very interesting movie. It's actually not a bad movie. I typically avoid remakes because I don't really care for the idea of someone taking someone else's idea, but it actually did a pretty decent job of retelling the story. And what I found interesting was in the cast, you had Aaron Paul in the movie, and then you had another, you had a little cameo of an actor by the name of Michael Bowen. Now it's funny because Michael Bowen and Aaron Paul would team up years later on Breaking Bad, so that was pretty cool seeing two actors appear in a movie before they actually appeared on another major project. Now, like I said, the remake of Last House on the Left, I believe it actually did pretty okay, and a lot of people felt that it was a pretty decent movie. It was decent remake. I mean, obviously, it's not quite, didn't have quite the impact of the original movie, but it was still still worth checking out. I mean, I don't really dissuade people from watching movies. I mean, if you want to watch it, go ahead and watch it. Besides, I do like Sarah Paxton a lot. She's kind of like a minor scream queen in quite a number of roles that she's been in, and she's a great young actress. I do believe that she was distantly related to Bill Paxton, from what I understand, but I'd have to look into that further. But Sarah Paxton, she's a great actress. Okay, now as we get closer to Halloween, I'm rounding up my list. I've done over 85, 86 lists. I mean, yeah, I've done that many lists. So this past week I did lists on alien abduction movies, home invasion movies, family-friendly movies, and on my birthday I posted a list of 13 films that were released the year I was born. I was born in 1971. Yeah, yay. And that was a pretty interesting year for horror movies. Granted, I was born before The Exorcist came out, or even like The Last House on the Left. Those came out a year or two after me, but I did get some pretty notable movies that were released my birth year. One of them is the Abominable Dr. Phibes, which features Vincent Price in what I think is one of his best roles. Now that's a movie. It's he plays this musical genius who's seeking revenge against the doctors and nurses who he blames for the death of his wife through what he feels is their incompetence. So it's a revenge movie, and it does tie into some of the biblical plagues. So it's a great movie. I mean, I love it. It's amazing. I mean, if you've never seen it before, and you like Vincent Price, definitely check it out. Oh, speaking of Vincent Price, I got this new poster here. Ooh, House House on Haunted Hill. It's a great poster. I'm gonna hang it up pretty soon because it's beautiful. I love it. It's great. I found it at that film festival, and I definitely had to have it because it was wonderful. Another movie that that came out the year I was born were some giallo movies that I had watched this year. They included Lizard in a Woman's Skin, Short Night of the Glass Dolls. Let's see, and Black Belly of the Tarantula. Those were also movies that I caught. Those are Italian giallos. Now, another movie that I definitely want to mention that came out in 1971 is a giallo by the name of Bay of Blood. Now, that one was directed by Mario Bava. When it was released, it was a horror movie, giallo style. Group of people go off to out in the woods to go camping, and they encounter a killer who basically takes them out one at a time. Now, this was 1971. Many people consider Bay of Blood to be the first slasher movie because the movie itself encompasses many of the tropes that you would find in slasher movies, especially Friday the 13th and Sleepaway Camp, as well as what you would see in Halloween and other slashers of the 80s. Actually, what's pretty funny is if you watch Bay of Blood, you'll actually notice that there are a couple of unique death scenes in there that were borrowed by the makers of Friday the 13th Parts 1 and 2. So you'll notice them if you're familiar with those movies. Now, another movie that came out in that year was a movie called Daughters of Darkness. That is a movie I caught on Joe Bob Briggs' marathon last year, and that one's a interesting genre. It's a lesbian vampire movie, so it's definitely something a little different. There's also a anthology film that came out called The House That Dripped Blood. That was a pretty good one. It had Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing in it. I checked it out again this year. It was pretty fun. There's The Twins of Evil, which is a movie I watched like 2 weeks ago, which is also definitely recommended. And let's see. Now, last movie I'm gonna of course, Willard. If you're not familiar with Willard, they did remake it a couple years ago with Crispin Glover. Now, the last movie I'm gonna talk about is a movie called Let's Scare Jessica to Death. It is an amazing movie. It is a strange movie. It's very atmospheric. It's got a lot of like bizarre imagery and a lot of like dreamlike sequences. It's a young woman is released from a mental facility, and she goes back to like her farmhouse with her family, and they're basically farmers, and she gets these mysterious visions of a woman, and the story itself is very interesting. It's a great movie. If you get a chance, I truly, highly recommend looking for Let's Scare Jessica to Death. It is one of the best movies that I've seen on my list, and of course, it's one of the best I've seen this year, and it's definitely one of the top 10 on my 300 watch. So I'm definitely going to include it when I do a list of the 10 best the 10 best from that 300 watch. Now, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter, Losman94. I'm also on Instagram with the same ID, LOSMAN94. I have a YouTube channel, which obviously these videos will go on, and I do have a blog and a website. You can get the links to those on my Twitter or my Instagram page. And with that, I will basically close this off and let you know that that's the Lowdown with Losman.